the correct place, but Max Keeles, well, has had not the ideal start to FP2 here. This is what's happened. He's out on the curbs on the exit. That's normally going to move it like very, very early. Oh, and he just picks up a little bit as well. That bike skittles through the gravel trap. But he's okay, up on his feet.
No, don't normally see that from Keeles, do we? That is exactly the place he crashed at in the race last year, as Kiko rightly mentioned. So drama then for the championship leader, early doors in FP2, not the start to the session Keeles would have wanted after a bit of a scrappy day. Yes, for Keeles, as mentioned, tried a couple of things on the bike that didn't work out, and then had that little incident with Fernandez, had a couple of moments as well. So Keeles will be hoping that bike will get restarted.
Check. Cek. Kok gak ada ya? Cek. Oh bener ya, mana apa? Cek. Gak ada. Bener ya. Cek. Nah segini. Gak. Oke segini aja lah. Dah. Oke kita cek streamingnya. Jadi kita hari ini seperti biasa hari Sabtu. Maaf. Oke. Gimana ya? Oke seperti biasa hari Sabtu. Bukan seperti biasanya sih, aku baru live, tapi hari ini kita nonton biasa Sabtu ada MotoGP Assen Belanda, dan sekarang baru Moto3 ya, di free practice berapa? Free practice 2 free practice 2 dan baru Moto3. Kita lihat Veda kalau di apa ya, di itunya sih nggak ada ya. Wah, sama ini.
Great to see the Italian, who's obviously a very exciting talent, just not quite clicked so far for the whole season in Leopard Honda colours. Hopefully this weekend is now the catalyst to really push on and push for more podiums and more.
And he's just got P1 as well. Max Keeles has got back out on track, so he managed to get started on the service road. Max Keeles was wandering through where he crashed earlier on from the Roxas.
Enggak deh.
The belly pad of that number 28. CF Moto Gaviota Asphalt team machine.
Oh iya judulnya belum ya. Gimana sih ini? Tutup aja. Enggak ada. Oh studio cuy. Oh iya benar ini. Oh judulnya belum anjing. Tar judul. Oh jalan streaming apa ya, edit MotoGP dulu guys,
Standing rider, of course, for David Munoz. Really impressive yesterday. We're not used to seeing him, to be honest, outside that sort of top 3, top 5 realm on a Friday afternoon. But the main thing for our man was he was
di Assen. OBS dan nah kenapa gak update ya? Oh, sekarang udah aktif nih. Kita udah tinggal 19 menit lagi. Waktunya Moto3, free practice Moto3. Pertama yang tercepat sekarang masih Guido Pini, Marco Moleri, Joel Kelso, Ryusei Yamanaka, Ruchi Mudri, Dian Uriarte, Joel Esteban, dan Veda Pratama di 8. Oke, mantap Veda. Tapi kita lihat di 10 menit terakhir sih suka apa ya, suka berpacu gitu ya, suka tiba-tiba bagus. Oke. Set. Nah, nanti oke, berarti udah. Harusnya kemarin Veda tuh di apa ya, di FP1 tuh dia simulasi balapan sih Veda, cuman dia mungkin gak tau lah kenapa ya, gak nonton juga sih waktunya jam 1 kemarin kan, jam 1 kemarin di Jumat, hari Jumat FP1 tuh yang FP2 yang praktis aku aja gua sih liatnya dia kan ini juga sih, dia apa crash juga jadi kurang lah. Wah, kebesaran ini. Udah gini aja lah. Ya, tapi Veda naik ke 4 cuy. Kok ini masih. Oh iya, turun. Sorry, delay cuy, delay. Apa lagi? Kita cek dulu. Ada. Koneksi dulu, terus kita ke YouTube, kita cek dulu. Sih harusnya garap itu juga ya, kayak garap apa namanya tuh, garap short ya, cuman ya banyak alasan sih gua, tapi gak apa-apa lah, santai aja. Berarti ini nih harus di ini. Di filter dulu, masih filter. Noise. Suspension coba cek nice ya. Udah lah, itu aja dulu. Nah, kayaknya harus headset sih, monitor. Covering your top 10, Peely back to Brian Uriarte. He's got his cousin just a tenth or less than a tenth behind him. We've got half
a second, less than half a second, covering 16 riders. So it is very, very tight at the TT circuits Assen this morning. We're in the second half of the session now. Salmela comes across the line, improves his time, and moves into, well, stays in 17th, but gets that gap down. Half a second off, and you're 17th now. You'd be wondering what's gone wrong.
Bit more like Moto 2, this really, isn't it, that we've seen so far this season. We know this Assen layout provides fantastic racing and very difficult from one lap to another, as Hakim Denise demonstrates there, to get the consistency right. A lot of riders yesterday were saying that to nail this circuit lap after lap, especially the final sector, such a phenomenal final sector, but one that's really tricky to really get right on a consistent basis, as Marco Morelli then rises to P1 with a 141.002. That would have put him second yesterday. Pini's lap time also was quicker than he went yesterday. A 140.918 for Joel Kelso's best hot time yesterday afternoon. And obviously these riders aren't pushing for a time attack. These guys are sort of working towards the race tomorrow morning. So understandably,
Noise gate, coba noise gate
a lot
juga.
cooler than they were yesterday afternoon, in the realms of the fastest lap so far of the weekend.
Worth noting as well that tomorrow
Tapi suaranya double ya.
weather is looking
Mungkin
pretty
karena
different, gotta
pakai
say. We are
speaker
expecting
luar sih.
some thunderstorms. Some thunderstorms hit Ireland about 2 days ago. They hit the UK yesterday evening, and it sounds as though, depending on what weather forecast you look on, they could be making their way across. At the moment, it's given us sunny and a mild 30 degrees is what we've had so far. But yesterday's weather forecast for tomorrow was looking a little bit iffy and potential thunderstorms. They look now like they've now moved to Saturday. A little bit of rain perhaps in the air this evening around 8 o'clock. So you could be sure that if that does happen, this track will lose a lot of that rubber that's been laid down over the course of today and yesterday. So just keep an eye on that, because this track gives great grip in generally any conditions. But
Iya.
it's fair to say that yesterday was so hot with the track temperature was almost 60 degrees at one point, that the TT circuit Assen has never been so warm.
Yeah, it was quite an astonishing day yesterday. As I said, real feel of 40 degrees, and speaking to the MotoGP riders yesterday especially, they were saying brutal conditions. They really were. It's more when they come into the box,
Cek.
so you get a nice bit
Nah.
of breeze on that bike, and the adrenaline when we're powering around
Ya.
this TT circuit Assen, you don't tend to think about the heat too much. It's when you pull into pit lane or sit in the box is when you really start to realise, wow, it is warm out there. And there was some murmurings yesterday that some of the MotoGP riders think we're potentially pushing for the race to be reduced by a few laps if the conditions
Iya,
are
bener.
similar tomorrow afternoon. We'll wait and see what happens. Storms are in the area potentially later on this evening or going into tomorrow. We'll wait and see how that plays out.
Buang lagi kameranya, terus masukin lagi capture ke visi media. Oke. Kurang sini sih. Kurang sini gak sih? Nice. Nice, tapi menang apa? Nah, gini aja ya kan? Besar cuy. Oke, sekarang gimana? Sekarang Marco Moreri di urutan pertama dengan waktu 1 menit 41. Kalah nih. Bener. Enggak kalah setengah. Ya, 1 menit 41,000. Terus kedua Guido Pini Guido Pini 141,070. Joel Kelso. Terus Veda kelima dengan catatan waktu 1 menit 41,132. Lumayan sih. Nice, Veda. Nice. Cuman all time recordnya berapa ya? Aku lupa. Coba kita lihat ya. All time record. All time record. Record Moto 3 Assen.
session, had a crash. Actually, about where he is on track, he's just about to come through turns 10 and 11. He tucked the front very, very early.
Oh, dengan catatan 1 menit 39 ya. Anjay, Adrian Kures. 140 kurang berapa? Kurang 1 menit lagi. Masih kurang. Mungkin nanti ya di kualifikasi sih kayaknya akan pecah sih. Deh. Menyisakan waktu 8 menit lagi. 8 menit lagi. Sepeda ke-6, terus Ogerman ke-7, Bertelli ke-8, Modli ke-9, Eban juga sama dan Uriarte. Terus sebenarnya gak diuntungkan sebenarnya Honda, tapi bentar. Honda sebenarnya bisa berbicara banyak di sini, soalnya tahun kemarin kan Kurusato kemarin ini kan menang kalau gak salah, gak? Atau naik podium kalau gak salah. Dan berarti bisa berbicara banyak. Kalau gak salah Adrian Kures tuh pakai Honda deh kalau gak salah ya. Turn 12 and then working his way back through down towards where we've just seen that little incident. And Keeler's is going to get his first flying lap on the board. Let's see where it puts him. Cruz says his lap has actually stretched the field out just behind him. We've got Fernandez and O'Gorman on exactly the same lap time there. Valentin Perone kenapa di bawah ya? Valentin Perone yang terkenal kan Valentin Perone, terus serius Alcarpe tuh di bawah 17. Yang si Mokil sudah di 4 lagi, anjir.
FP2, a lot can change, of course, from FP2 to the race and different circumstances, of course. When you're racing, it's completely different to not cruising around in FP2. No one here is cruising, but, you know, you can get into a nice rhythm, no disruptions from other riders, using it a little bit less of the tyre as well, potentially not getting a bit too excited at times. And, yeah, Keeler's just said he didn't have the same feeling, which you can understand, but still a great podium, continuing fine form for Keeler's so far, and seeing him rise to P4 on his first flying lap of the session is no real surprise, to be fair. Keeler's, we know, wherever we go this season, he's going to be fast. Obviously, mistakes are going to happen, not the FP2 so far Keeler's would have wanted, but that's just a little bit of a sign, a little bit of a warning shot to the rivals that even though he's been in the gravel, been in the dirt and not set, well, he's set one flying lap so far in this session.
Adrian Fernandez abis kena diskualifikasi sih jadi melempem ya. Tapi sekarang ke-8. Itu ya kayak kalau kata Matteo si Adrian Fernandez itu bukan kesalahan dia, cuman karena kesalahan timnya. Dan karena itu kata Matteo ya, kata Om Matteo, kesalahan karena si segelnya tuh terlalu gampang rusak, jadi si segelnya tuh gampang rusak. Jadi sebenarnya dikeluhkan sama tim yang lainnya juga, cuman gak tahu memang benar, gak tahu apa gitu. Tetapi kalau secara segel tuh memang ada komplain dari semua satelit ya, semua tim gitu. Cuman ya mungkin apes aja gitu ya Adrian Fernandez. Ya kasihan juga sih, dia udah lama banget nih di Moto3, sama kayak Yusei Yamanaka. Oke, sekarang Adrian Fernandez masuk ke 3 dengan catatan waktu 1 menit 41,0002.
Become more important in this class, and this is good to see, isn't it? Adrian Fernandez in a bit of a better headspace this weekend than he was over at the Czech Grand Prix, and a good lap time to improve his time in second place.
Oh, ternyata telat cuy. Ini Moto timingnya ternyata telat cuy. Oh, bisa telat ya.
Max Keeler's bike's all scuffed up on the right hand side. Keeler's coming through the chicane. He's just under a tenth off 3 sectors into this. Let's see what he's got across the line. And it does move
Ini
into
ke bawahin,
fifth place, stays exactly where he was. Rios was going through sector 2 very fast, as was Morelli. I think those two are pretty much together on track. Perhaps Rios just ahead. Yes, indeed he is. Rios moves up into 7th and Morelli goes 2nd. Kelso, your
Marco Morelli kedua, Adrian Cruzes masih pertama. Gak akan pecah sih all time record tercepatnya sih enggak sih, gak bakalan kalau di FP gini mah. Kalau di qualifying practice sih mungkin ya pecah, cuman ya sebenarnya di lintasan ini tuh sebenarnya apa si Honda tuh bisa berbicara banyak ya, cuman ya mungkin banyak tikungan cepat dan ya tapi mungkin ya beberapa kesialan mungkin ya, sebenarnya tuh ada beberapa Honda ya, Cruises kan kalau gak salah, Cruises terus Adrian Fernandez di depan tuh yang 10 besar ya, yang Honda Guido Pini, Veda udah segitu kalau gak salah ya Hondanya, cuman kebanyakan ATM.
This weekend at Assen, that's not where he needs to be at all. Just over 2 minutes left on the clock. Keeler's making a little bit of a mess at the end of this lap. Let's see what he's got across line. He's in 7th place at the moment. Doesn't improve, lost a lot of time in that final sector. Joel Esteban's on for a personal best, as you can see. And then further down, we've got Valentin Peroni. It's 3/10 off as well. Peroni 17th. He was last yesterday. So
Tapi sumpah sih cangkulnya dia pakai kursi gini. Ya beda turun lagi ke 11 besar. Iya. Gak tahu sih. Ya. Coba kita matiin dulu ininya. Atau kita main ML dulu. ML dulu gak sih guys?
You mentioned him there, the 73 of Valentin Peroni, of course, picked up his debut podium here last year. Obviously finished bottom of the timesheets yesterday. Disappointing day.
Tapi tahu sih. Tapi coba kita cari ini sih, cari kursi. Yang enak.
Not getting a banker lap time in for Peroni in the mid to part or the start of the session. Unfortunately, saw the young Argentine finish bottom of the timesheet. So Peroni will be going through Q1 for the first time this season after finishing outside the top 14 on a Friday.
Oh, ada. Nah, sekarang Alvaro Carpe dengan waktu 1 Carpe di urutan pertama dengan waktu 1 menit 47 67 8. Ya kita lihat aja lah. Habis ini kan bentar lagi udahan nih. Satu lap lagi lah buat Veda nih. 017. Veda ke-7 nih. Apakah bisa tembus Veda? Tapi gak ada. Namanya juga pre-practice ya, latihan bebas, jadi ya ini mah cuman muter-muter tes engine aja. Looks like he's going to stay P1 in this session at the moment. I don't see any red sectors on our timing screen. So Carpe once again doing the business on a Saturday morning.
judging from the
tunggulah.
German's car pace setting, I imagine he went back out on used tyres. Got that good lap time in, of course, to see him rise to P1 in this session, a 40.6 fastest lap of the weekend, 3/10 quicker than, well, just less than 3/10 quicker than Kelso went yesterday, and it's another decent time as well, a 140.9, around about 3/10, sorry, off the top time from Carpe, but that was a decent little run if they were used tyres, of course. We're sort of an educated guess
Di
here in
ininya berapa
commentary.
sih?
But yeah, a decent end to the session for Alvaro Carpe, who was sat outside of the top 15 at one point.
This is Keeles, 10th place at the moment. Our only
Bentar,
crasher
satu
in this
putaran
session
lagi kan?
as well, over
Bentar.
at turn 10. So Keeles, as you can see, with all those scrape marks
Masih
on
mau
the side
Kiles,
of
dapat
that
berapa
number
dia?
28
Ah, enggak
machine,
deng.
works his way down towards the chicane.
Putih
This is in the
semua
middle,
anjir.
this time on place
Ini
less.
cuman
He does
latihan
something
doang.
majestic in sector 4 here at Assen, comes across the line, session done for him, and indeed it is P10 at
1
the
menit
moment.
41,
Looking down on our
139.
time screen, few personal bests opening halves to the lap, but sector 3 is where it all starts to go away for most riders. So looks like that is about all she wrote here at the TT circuit. Assen, we're having a look at Adrian Fernandez. Quick there, up in 6th place. Good little stint towards the end of the session there, El. That'll be encouraging if he's in the lead group for tomorrow's Grand Prix.
Yeah, for sure. As mentioned, Fernandez sounds like he's feeling much more like himself. He said this yesterday. What are we seeing here? This is the corner that Keeles crashed at yesterday, and Fernandez, good job from the number 31 to save that, because that front end was really wanting to throw it down the road.
Yeah, that front end was under him for a week through turn 10. He did what Max Keeles
Oke, udah.
earlier on.
Jadi yang pertama ada Carpe, Curses, terus Kelso, Marco Morelli, Joel Esteban, Adrian Fernandez, Herone, Vidapini, Ogden, Massimo Kiles, dan Veda ke-13. Udah habis kita nonton. Ah, gak ada juga sih. Nonton kali ya.
Adrian Cruces just leading around. Good session that from Cruces, up in 2nd place. His teammate Scott Ogden will be looking to see if he can move through later on. He's got a bit of work to do as the number 19 as we pick up Joel Kelso, 3rd in that session now. Another great day at the
Asisnya gue mau nonton aja, jangan pakai webcam juga.
You know,
Kita nonton. Bagus. Kita nonton. Gue pengen dilebarin, kita nonton Moto 2 sama Moto 3 nya. Dar. Hey.
But a little bit further down the order than he would have wanted.
Championship leader Max Keeles ends FP2 in 10th and with a crash against his name, whereas it's Alvaro Carpe who's chasing him in the standings, who is FP2 and P1 at the moment, ahead of Adrian Cruces, a Spanish 1-2. Joel Kelso fastest yesterday, 3rd this morning. Marco Morelli there in 4th, and Joel Esteban with a late lap completing your top 5. All the way down the order, there's a bit of work to do for Brian Iriarte down there just ahead of his cousin, and with an identical lap time to his cousin there. Marcus Iriarte 18th and 19th for the Iriartes. Nicola Carraro rounding out the order with a time that's not really representative of where the rest of the field is at. But Moto 3 FP2 is in the books. The next time those guys go out on track will be for qualifying 1. That's coming up at 12:45. Myself and Lewis Sotheby will be taking you through that with Elliot York down in pit lane, and that is the perfect segue to move in to Moto 2, because Lewis Sotheby has entered the box. I am now leaving the building. It has been a pleasure. Moto 3 FP2 done and dusted. Moto 2 coming up. Enjoy.
Moto 2 Assen.
And it is a very good morning to you once again from the Cathedral of Speed. A spectacular
Aji
Super
tadi.
Saturday lies in store at the Grand Prix of the Netherlands, more commonly known to, I'm sure, many of you at home as the Dutch TT. Spectacular skies, a spectacular setting for a Grand Prix venue that, save for our 2020 COVID-interrupted season, has been an ever-present on the Grand
Soalnya
Prix
lewat
calendar.
performa sih
Just feels
pengkiat
right, doesn't
juga
it?
susah gitu sama si Sergio Garcia.
At the Cathedral,
Garcia.
went the way of Jack Miller, an extraordinary rain-affected victory for the Aussie. We're not expecting that sort of weather to hit us, though. Certainly in the upcoming sessions, with barely a cloud above our heads. Scorching conditions once again, as we touched upon yesterday. This feels more like Buriram or Mandalika or Sepang in Malaysia than the Netherlands. Very un-Assen-like conditions. Not that we're complaining that much, because usually we're packing the raincoats, we're taking the umbrellas. They are almost essential Assen wear. But this weekend, the umbrella's only shielding you from the sun, and as few layers as you can get away with, really, to keep you as cool as possible. They really have done so much here at the TT Circuit Assen to make sure that the fans here are as protected as possible from these extreme conditions with this Central European
Another
heat
point,
wave taking place. And the temperatures on track sure to be hot as well. Yeah, they're doing all sorts for the fans with free sunscreen, free water cannons cooling the fans as well. I think we could do some of it here in the commentary box, as Lewis Sotheby and Elliot York welcome you to Moto 2 free practice 2 coverage. The colour very much orange L in this Moto 2 class. Colin Via and Zonta van den Gorberg will be flying the flag. They have one rider in Q2 and one currently in Q1. Good morning.
Good morning, mate. Hello to everyone just tuning in for Moto 2 free practice 2 here on Saturday. Yeah, Zonta van den Gorberg, I think, quite frustrated at the end of the session, and understandably so. One to be 4.5 tenths away from the fastest time set by David Alonso, who is on your screens now, and to be outside of the top 14 super tight yesterday. I mean, it always is in Moto 2, but especially yesterday around the TT circuit. Assen, unfortunately for Zonta van den Gorberg, just missing out by half a tenth basically to Joe Roberts, who was P14. But a good day yesterday for Colin Via. He was inside that top 14, and so coming into the weekend he feels very confident. Was a good day yesterday. Very satisfied with the work done. FP1 wasn't easy, but improved as the day went on. Got a good lap time in.
Aji kan mau
The
ditukar sama
95, feeling strong and yeah, ready to try and attack the front two rows later on this afternoon.
A second covered the top
di
21
Mario
yesterday.
di Moto 2
that's basically
demi
80% of
ada
the
yang
field in this Moto 2
ada yang
class.
perform
So close
kan.
it is. Here is
Kayaknya sekarang sih udah ada ya. Di Tayo Foro 1 udah lumayan sih sekarang. Cuman nggak perform banget sih. Jadi nggak ada yang bisa ditaikin lagi kan. Pokoknya Moto 3 semuanya baru. Zen sama Reda kan masih jadi gak bisa buru-buru. Masih menarik sih kalau si Ramaditya tahun sekarang udah posisi 3 besar di RBRC ataupun MotoGP Junior GP sih bingung tuh Honda. Ada yang bilang gosip tuh bahwa si Ramaditya mau ke tim
Certainly, I looked into the lap by lap analysis. I think the better it did ultimately look for the points leader yesterday.
Yeah, it was very confident.
Salah mau kesanain tim ya bang yang basisnya Honda juga sih. Di ke tim lain soalnya kan ya Honda mungkin gak mau ya, mau semuanya Indo harus ada Jepangnya. Cuman ya dan Mitami gak performanya.
realising
Gimana?
yesterday that the conditions were very, very tough, completely changed from the morning to the afternoon, and referenced his experience on the Pirelli tyres. He said he knows, feeling on that front end especially, when the conditions are like that, he knows exactly where the limit is, and said a lot of riders yesterday crashed because of that, and he did say it was very, very easy to do so as well in those tough conditions. But Gonzalez,
Oh
as
iya,
we've
bener.
seen so far this season, as we heard a lot last year on a Friday,
Oh iya, ini
just
juga
hitting
sih
it a
di
weekend,
gosip-gosip
hitting
yang
the
naik
ground
kan
running,
banyak banget
and
rookie
just sounding
kan
like a very confident
di
World
MotoGP.
Championship leader.
Ada
And a really good day for Gonzalez
ya apa?
yesterday, as
Dani
mentioned, on a
Holgado
track
ya.
that doesn't
David
necessarily
Alonso
sits at the top
dapat
of his
kontrak.
favourites.
Padahal
Center ages, I think we'll have
di
this circuit quite
Moto
high
tuh
up
dia
his list
gak
of favourites
ngapa-ngapain.
based on the evidence of yesterday.
Di David
Fourth
Alonso
quickest overall.
gak ngapa-ngapain juga sih, cuma
And certainly from what we saw in free practice 1, it looks
apa
as
ya,
if Gonzalez and Aegis had a clear step on the rest. The pack very much
mungkin
closed
daya
up together
adaptasinya
when we got
kurang
into
sih.
practice. We
Kayaknya
got
Honda
very
zong deh
challenging
milih
conditions
David
yesterday. Of
Alonso.
course, the heat is
Kayaknya
presenting its own physical challenge
ya
for the
maksudnya
riders on
kalau
the circuit.
track
But
recordnya
grip
dari
levels were
apa
well
namanya itu
low
sih
as the temperatures skyrocketed
Diego
in
Moreira
practice
aja
yesterday.
ke
We had
MotoGP
9
itu
crashes
kesusahan banget
in
kan sekarang.
total yesterday in practice. Admittedly, 5 of those were
Mau ke 10
responsible
besar
for
aja
2
susah
riders
banget.
responsible for them. 3 for Yuki Sasaki,
Sekarang
2 for Alberto Ferrandez, but ultimately we had 9
Honda
crashes, and
kontrak
perhaps the
David
key
Alonso.
crash among those is a rider who we saw on screen about a moment ago, already sat on board his Speed RS Boscoscuro, ready to go. Certainly in terms of the World Championship situation now,
Banget pasti yang perform tuh antara
who is the standout name
Dani
going through
Holgado
qualifying
sih.
1. It was a poor day
Soalnya
all
Dani
told
Holgado
for
kan
the Speed RS
pakainya
team. Here's his
pakai
teammate Luca Lanetta, who
hati
also went down. He
Gresini
crashed at
ya.
turn 7. Nightmare day for Speed RS. A double whammy really for Celestino Vietti. He's in qualifying 1 and missed out on some crucial track time.
Yeah, exactly that. A massive crash on the exit of turn 5
Aduh
of
hati
Strubben, and he
GP
wasn't able to get out for the
20
rest of the session. Thankfully,
juara
VFT is all okay.
terus
No big
apalagi
serious injuries, which could have easily been picked
Majuan
up
Mir
on the big high side
Gresini
yesterday, but the bike was absolutely destroyed,
dua
and
kan
no
dua
surprise
itu.
really to see Vietti
Apalagi
not able to get back out for the rest of the session. So a huge FP2 coming up for Vietti. It's now
udah
2
dua
Q1s in the last 3 for Celestino Vietti, and even if you're getting through Q1 into Q2, that sort of form when you've got the likes of
Gonzalez udah pasti menang,
consistently
cuman
inside that top 3 on
gak
a
ada yang
Friday,
mau
looking really strong and
timnya,
sounding very confident, then the Italian needs to just sort it out
MotoGP-nya
on
soalnya
Friday and sort qualifying
terhalang
out as
kelas
well.
sport
If he can have a good session
kan
this morning and qualify at
di ini
least on the
sama
front 3 rows, but
ini kan
ideally on the top 2 rows for Vietti. That's
gak
going to be
terlalu
crucial
banyak
going into
Spanyol,
tomorrow,
jadi
depending of course what happens with Gonzalez.
ngapain
But
dikatain
Vietti needs to, I think,
sebagai
concentrate
apa namanya itu
on himself first and foremost. Not been an
oke
ideal few Grand
berarti
Prix.
pengganti
Had a
si
great
Mario
comeback,
Aji
of course, over at Mugello, but a P7 in Hungary, P9 last time out in the Czech Republic. Just needs to get
ya
the momentum
dia
back
si
on his
Mano
side, get the
Gonzalez
ball rolling again in terms of picking up some
sih
strong championship points.
Here's Aaron Canet then. Inside the
dan
Marquez
banget
box. Yeah, the Boscoscuro story is an interesting
terus
one. Ethan Cavara said after practice yesterday that he doesn't.
ya cara satu-satunya sih dia menangin mau gak mau karena kalau mungkin kalau menang gak dikasih tempat
through
sih
into qualifying 2. We have
malu-maluin
seen
ya
him in Q2 on 6 previous
maluin
occasions
itu
this season.
maluin
But it is actually just the third time this year that Aaron Canet has automatically
masa udah menang
qualifying 2.
yang
Steps in the right
gak
direction for him.
dinaikin ke Moto
13th on 136
aneh
473. Just 2 Boscoscuros are through to
dikit
Q2 with Guevara at 12th and Canet in 13th. It certainly does appear from the evidence of
kan
yesterday
VR Mortisik udah pasti sama
Bosco's on their
Bolega
back foot a little bit up against
kagak pasti banget
Tossi
sih
and
cuman
Palletes that
90%
populate the
lah
top
udah
14.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no boss
di Fermin
Scuro
Bolega
inside
terus
that top 10. Ethan Guevara and Aaron Canet, the only riders inside that top
track host gak
14.
ada
You rightly mentioned Guevara
track
saying
host
that it's
dan
not a circuit that
Aprilia
necessarily
gak
suits the
ada
characteristics of
mungkin
the
yang
Boscoscuro,
jadi
but
kejutan si
great to hear
KTM
Canet having a good day yesterday, as he
KTM kan
described it.
udah
A big step forward, he said, after Friday. Of course, it's only
komunikasinya
Friday,
sih
but
yang
very
si
positive to see Canet
namanya
consistently really hovering around that top 10, was in that top
kurang
6 at one
komunikasinya
point as well, managed to get into
sinyalis
that
juga
top
bakal di
14
depan
with a lot of yellow flags as well that
apa
disturbed a lot of riders and was very easy to crash, as we saw yesterday as well. And Canet has had a few crashes, unfortunately. Some not his
kan
fault,
ada
some
satu
his
Yamaha
fault on the number 44 bike. So
Yamaha
yeah, a clean
jadi
Friday and a strong Friday, most importantly a fast Friday,
kemungkinan
for Canet, which is
besar
exactly what he would have wanted coming
yang
into
menjadi
Saudi,
tandem
that
si
last year.
Toprak
Yeah, just
itu
13.5 points to
itu
Aaron
kemungkinan
Canet's name at this
besar
quite late stage
Izan
of the
gue
season to
Pak.
have such a poor points total. This is round 10 of 22. We'll hit the halfway stage of the season in a couple of weeks' time. The German Grand Prix at the Saxon Ring. And free practice 2 now underway. As always, a session that doesn't count in terms of who goes through the Q2 or not, but is a very interesting and important session to see who's got the sort of race pace that will put them in the frame for victory tomorrow. Qualifying, of course, to come later on this afternoon ahead of the TISO sprint. So make sure you're with us. It's a bumper Saturday of action here at the Cathedral of Speed. Pretty much wall-to-wall motorcycle racing action here at Assen today. Of course, MotoGP free practice 2 qualifying follows us in this session. Straight off the back of that, we're into Baggers World Cup qualifying as well. Kiko Giles and Neil Morrison will be bringing you that before I jump in alongside Kiko for Moto 3 and Moto 2 qualifying. The sprint, of course, at 3 p.m. local time as always, before the first of 2 Baggers World Cup races completes our day of action later on today. You're certainly getting full value for money if you've bought a ticket to the Dutch TT this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. A great weekend, of course, as it always is here at the Dutch TT. One of the real jewels in the crown of the MotoGP calendar, isn't it? And if you haven't been, then I would urge you to do so, especially when the weather is like this. But even when the weather's pretty grim, it's still a fantastic weekend here at the Dutch TT. One of the circuits, obviously steeped in history, the most historic venue we go to, but it's one of those where you walk through the gates into the paddock and see the big TT sign. When you're driving into the paddock as well, you get a real sense of history and a sense that you're a very special venue. And of course, I don't think anyone dislikes the layouts, and we always get a phenomenal crowd here as well. So yeah, Friday is always Friday. Friday afternoons, of course, are like a mini qualifying session, aren't they? But when it gets into Saturday, and such a bumper Saturday as well, it really gets the juices flowing, and can't wait, especially with the weather like it is. Tougher conditions this afternoon, it's got to be said, and a tough afternoon yesterday for the rider on screen, Lewis. Ayumu Sasaki in the conditions. 3 crashes, pretty unprecedented, really. The main thing for Ayumu is glad to see that he's all okay, because chucking it down the road 3 times, of course, you risk an injury. You risk an injury every time you go out on a motorcycle. But 3 crashes in 3 different locations around this TT circuit for the number 71 yesterday. But thankfully, he's all okay. But a day to forget, really, for Sasaki, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 3 crashes in 8 laps ultimately for Ayumu yesterday. 22nd overall. He'll be a part of qualifying 1 later on alongside his teammate Zonta van Gorberg. We'll have, as mentioned, Celestino Vietti in that Q1 session as well. His teammate Luca Lanetta also joins him after a crash apiece for those particular Boscoscuro riders yesterday. In terms of the rookies, well, the star rookie yesterday was Toyo Furusato, as we look at Jose Antonio Rueda, who's down in 20th place. Some real standout performances in that top 10. In particular, Furusato and Adrian Huertas. Let's start with Furusato.
Kalau Moto3 kan
P1
yang pertama
yesterday, wasn't he?
Brian Orearte, kedua
72. Another achievement, another milestone ticked off for Hiroshi Ayama, and pointing at the continuing building of confidence for Furusato. First first automatic Q2 in Brno last weekend, and those building blocks continuing to be put in place by young Taya.
Yeah, absolutely. Back-to-back points, back-to-back P14s in 2026 now for Furusato. And from what he was saying yesterday, it sounds like it wasn't a fluke, and we absolutely saw that. It wasn't a one-off lap time. Furusato was able to do a few laps in that realm and get himself inside that top 14 pretty comfortably, it's got to be said, and especially on a day where the times were super tight, as we mentioned. 4 tenths was on Van der Gorberg's deficit to the top time, and he was outside that top 14. Furusato under 2 tenths away in P7 and led the session for a couple of laps as well yesterday, and just said he's feeling really good and enjoying the bike, which is great to hear, because at the start of the season and until really Hungary, when he did pick up those first points, of course, Furusato was having a pretty tough time of things. A massive jump from Moto 3 to Moto 2. I've said this before, but Marc Marquez, when he comes out and says the jump from Moto 3 to Moto 2 is bigger and you have to adapt more to the motorcycle than when you jump from Moto 2 to Moto GP, then you know that is absolutely the case. So the rookie's having a bit of a tougher time of things so far this season. Jose Antonio Rueda leading the rookie standings as it is. Luca Naletta there on the number 32, a rookie who's had his injury problems this year, picked up that broken leg here in Assen last year as well, and of course had a big crash here yesterday. So good to see Naletta to back out on track. But the lead rookie yesterday was, as mentioned, Taya Furusato, and great to see the number 72 having a better time of things and looking confident and sounding confident. We know the talent Furusato has from Moto 3, was an eventual winner last year in that class as well, and we're all expecting Furusato to be quick in Moto 2. I don't think anyone has any doubts about the raw speed that Furusato has, but yeah, getting towards the summer, it is sort of where you'd start to see the rookies getting to grips with Moto 2, and that's exactly what we've seen with Furusato.
Not a rookie, but also impressive yesterday, as mentioned, was Adrian Huertas, 10th quickest for him yesterday, and it's been a long time between drinks for Huertas in terms of Q2. First Q2 appearance at Jerez for him. Hasn't reached Q2 automatically since the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, way back at the end of March. So a notable result for Huertas, who has found himself way down the back of the grid in recent qualifying sessions. So a big boost for his weekend as we follow the World Championship leader Manu Gonzalez, who goes second. Holgado, your early leader in the session, on a 1:35.972. Gonzalez does hold the fastest lap time of the weekend so far, which is
kalau nggak salah David Munoz, kalau gua
7:19. It was 0.4 of a second slower, the fastest time in practice yesterday, with the scorching heat, which doesn't of course have a just an effect on the riders, has an effect on the bikes,
kalau
has an effect on the
bagus di
tyres
Moto
as
3
well, and of course has a serious
bagus
effect on the circuit. It does make it a little more greasy and
soalnya
difficult
ya
to ultimately
sekelas
find
Pedro
that
Acosta juga
explosive grip
ya
when you put a new tyre in.
juara
As we
cuma
follow
1 tahun
the
gitu.
98 of Rueda,
Jadi
winner of the Moto 3
Moto
race last year,
3
and moves up into
pindah ke
4th
Moto
place,
2
1:36.107. So
di tahun keduanya sih memang
Rueda has
bakat.
already improved by 0.8 of a second than what he did yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, Rueda described yesterday
Ada
as a
itunya
tough
dulu
day
lah
and struggled to get going because he did
dua
mention the
di Moto.
lines compared to a Moto 3 bike, or when you jump onto a Moto 2 bike here at Assen, are really difficult to get used to. A lot of change as Danny Holgado dips into the 1:35s, 1:35.911. Good start to the session for the number 96, but the number 98 of Rueda did say that made some changes, and in practice especially, it made him feel a lot more comfortable on that motorcycle. Was in the top 10, of course, last weekend over in Brno. His best finish in Moto 2 to date, and he's on a run now of 4 points in a row, and is first top 10 last time out. So Rueda, as we mentioned for Taya Furusato, as we creep towards the summer, creeping towards the middle part of the season, we are seeing the rookies start to come into their own, and Rueda is certainly one of those. Has been the standout rookie so far in the last 4 Grand Prix, especially in 2026. The reigning Moto 3 champion, of course, and yeah, had a decent day yesterday. Described it as tough, but in the end, it was not a bad day. It doesn't really reflect the P20, I don't think, on the timesheets for Rueda in terms of his actual feeling on the motorcycle.
Gonzalez up at the top spot now in a 1:35.8. As I mentioned before the session got underway, the deeper you look into the analysis sheets and the lap-by-lap breakdown, the better it looks for Manu Gonzalez. Looking at what everybody did yesterday, the general pace was in the 1:36s. The fastest lap time yesterday was in a low 1:36 to 36.1. So if you look at everyone's laps and look at who did the most 1:36s, now this does include laps that were scrubbed off for yellow flags, because there were quite a lot of them, which does muddy the waters ever so slightly. Manu Gonzalez and Senna Aegis, they did 9 laps apiece in the 1:36s yesterday. Next best behind them was Ivan Ortola, the Brno winner, who was able to put in 7. We saw 6 apiece for David Alonso and Danny Holgado, the Aspar duo. Tony Arbolino, who was 3rd yesterday, he was able to put in 5. And then we had 4 for Alex Escridge. Ethan Guevara, actually, who was down the order, he also put in 6 laps in the 1:36s yesterday. So perhaps on the longer runs, maybe a little bit more competitive than his outright lap time of yesterday. So it did appear, certainly the longer the runs went on, as if the intact pair, Gonzalez and Aegis, had a bit of a step on the rest. And right on cue, it's Manu Gonzalez who retakes top spot on a 1:35.845. Think back to last year, we thought that Gonzalez and Aegis were going to be super strong and super hard to beat last year, but then they struggled badly with a lack of rear grip early on in the race, which opened the door for Diogo Moreira and Aaron Kinnett to step in. But of course, as we discussed yesterday, they're not just fighting potentially for a Moto 2 World Championship down there at Intact, potentially a spot on the MotoGP grid too.
Yeah, absolutely. A big weekend, a big couple of weekends, you feel, for Manu Gonzalez and Senna Aegis to prove to what we believe is Red Bull KTM Tech 3. Maybe Trackhouse as well, but it does definitely sound like Tech 3 have got an available seat for a rookie, a pending rookie, which does sound like it's between Gonzalez and Aegis, an inter-team battle for the championship, and to fight for race wins and regular podiums, but also to try and get a seat on the MotoGP grid in 2027. Aegis did say yesterday that straight from the off he was feeling really good, was disappointed to miss out on the podium last weekend over in Brno. He felt like he had a package underneath him to win, but was just struggling in a couple of areas. And didn't really make the progress he would have wanted, but Aegis was disappointed to not even get on the podium. He said
sekarang dipimpin oleh Daniel Holgado.
for Aegis last time out,
Terus
finished ahead of Gonzalez.
Gonzalez, Daniel Holgado dengan 1 menit 35.
Really intriguing one, a really interesting one to keep our eyes on. Of course, the Moto2 Championship is alive and kicking. Gonzalez has the front foot.
Gonzalez, Senna Agius,
Ethan Guevara.
Estrik,
amongst us
ya
might
itulah.
want that to creep a little bit further down as we head to the summer break. Gonzalez certainly won't be one of those though. He'll be wanting to keep that advantage in the 50s and maybe even higher as well, as another good lap time comes in from the championship leader, 1:35.929. But it is one to keep our eyes on.
Daniel Holgado dengan 1:35.829, terus Manuel Gonzalez, Senna Agius, Alex Estrig, Alberto Fernandez, David Alonso, Jose Antonio Rueda, Joe Robert, Dennis Oncu, dan Ivan Ortola tersebut. Oke. Kira parah banget nih, kasihan banget ya. Soalnya di Moto3 juga dia udah apa namanya itu udah apa udah menurun, cuman ya mungkin dia dipaksain ya, paksain ke atas ya.
The Australian, so it's going to be an interesting one to see who Gunter Steiner especially potentially will pick.
Yeah, so much in this Grand Prix paddock is about what have you done for me lately.
Atau kita beli ini aja, kursi itu, kursi plastik aja gitu.
On the podium here too at the TT circuit Assen. Of course, everyone knew how good he was. It wasn't as if he came out of absolutely nowhere, but he had a very tough time of it in Moto2. Suddenly exploded onto the scene with that incredible run of results, and it was Razlan Razli at the time, wasn't it, from the Sepang International Circuit team, the Petronas Yamaha squad, who saw those performances and thought, that's a kid that's worth my faith for the future, and that's the for next season. We'll have 4 Moto2 graduates, the most for quite some time, moving up from Moto2 to MotoGP next season. Gonzalez or Aegis joining Ethan Guevara, David Alonso and Danny Holgado, who we all fully expect to have already signed their place on the MotoGP grid for next year.
Yeah, a long time ago as well. Another name that's been I imagine Tech 3 aren't going to be rushing the decision. They'll want to see what Aegis and Gonzalez have got over the next couple of Grand Prix, and then we've obviously got a bit of a summer break before we go to Silverstone, and another couple of weeks off before we go to Aragon as well. I imagine before the end of August, when we are at Moatsland, we'll probably know who they've picked and the full grid in MotoGP, and then we'll begin to get the ball rolling in terms of signatures and learning where riders are going in Moto2 and Moto3 as well. But keep your eyes peeled on that one, as you know, we don't really need to tell you guys to do that. You're going to be doing that anyway, but it's a fascinating one to try and hear what the rumours are saying, who's got the upper hand as things stand. Gonzalez versus Aegis on track and off track is going to be one to watch.
Yeah, there's a faint chance, I guess, that the rider we saw a moment ago in the Speed Xbox Chelsea Vietti could make it 5 Moto2 graduates for next season, but it definitely feels as if he's the outsider in betting terms, with Nicola Bruliger strongly predicted the unbeaten World Superbike Championship leader in 2026, as if he's going to take the place alongside what is expected to be Fermin Aldeguer at VR46 Ducati for next season. Vietti currently in 16th place, session really behind the rest of the field in this Moto 2 class, and already with the ice pack on the back of his neck at this stage, whether that's to keep him cool or potentially help him numb some pain from yesterday. More likely the former. We've had various different strategies and methods, haven't we, of keeping cool already through this weekend. We've already had the ice pack, we've had the cold towel around the neck of Jorge Martin, we've seen the cool cans of energy drink on the back of the neck of Marco Bezzecchi. Our best hope is for some working aircon after the issues we had yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, it's cool enough as things stand. I mean, a toasty 27 degrees outside, and it's 9:40 local time here at the TT Circuit Assen. So if it was 27 degrees this afternoon, everyone would be saying that's pretty toasty, but with sleep last night, no aircon where we're staying as well, so a little bit tough conditions for us to deal with as well. Not what we used to here in Assen, but we will continue to get along with it, and I don't think we can complain too much when the sun is shining here on the Dutch TT Saturday. Van den Gorberg sets in 1:36.5. Again, the times are super close, Lewis, aren't they? Not as probably tight as we saw yesterday, but half a second away, just over half a second away, splitting the top 14s down to Sergio Garcia, who currently occupies P14, and Zonta van der Gorberg just over 6/10 away in P17.
Yeah, if you look at the whole field, it's actually closer. A second covers 25 of our 28 riders. That's about to become 26 when current P27 rider Forasato moves himself up the order. Here he is just behind Senna Aegis. He'll appear out of the final chicane.
Kemarin tuh Forasato bagus sih.
Here comes Forasato, climbs
Kan
15
sekarang
places,
jadi
27 up to
lagi.
12. So now we have
Apa ya dia?
996 covering all bar 2 of the riders in this field, and you've got Angel Piqueras, who's 1.07 off the pace, and Jorge Navarro, who's in for the injured Barry Baltus, who we wish all the very best from his recent shoulder surgery.
To standing riders, Milan Pavelec in P20, only 6/10 away. Great job from the number 40, and so too to Jacob Ralston, P24. Not pretty reading on the timesheets, but only 8/10 away from the top time. Both riders standing in, of course. Pavelec for Alonso Lopez, Ralston for Mario Aggi. Hopefully we see the full-time riders back. If it's not the German Grand Prix, we're fully expecting it to be at least at Silverstone. But great job from those two, especially as things stand. To be within a second of Danny Holgado and Manu Gonzalez at the top are, of course, a race winners so far in 2026. Never easy to come into the Moto 2 class and stand in for injured riders, get used to new bikes, new surroundings as well, and be within a second. So yeah, just a quick nod to those.
He is the reigning European champion, and is very much in contention to defend that title this season, and this is all just golden experience for Ralston, for him to potentially take back into the European Championship, albeit he does ride a Boscoscuro in the European Championship, not a Calex, but all experience at this level on Moto 2 machinery will be useful for him going forwards. Here comes John Roberts, who fails to improve. He's 8th at the moment on a 1:36.123 for next season. I don't think anyone will be surprised by that.
At it, and was obviously 2.5 away and down in P9. I mean, P9 for Salac in the last few Grand Prix is a pretty poor result, but overall, when it was a tricky day, technical issues as well thrown in there, and only getting one time attack in, a lot of riders obviously struggled at the end of the session with so many yellow flags to get more than 1 or 2 lap times. But Salac was one of those, but got the job done when it mattered, and top 14 on a Friday doesn't really matter where your position is. If you're inside that top 14, you sleep a little easier on Friday, and a little less stress going into Saturday. So yeah. top 10 with only one flying lap at it.
Sato continuing to move, not up the order, but certainly improve his lap time down to a 36.270 now, 0.441 off the pace. P12 is what that amounts to. Holgado's continuing to set a quite impressive pace actually in this session. He and Ortola, as you just saw, are together on the racetrack. Ortola, the Brno winner, who's getting quite used to staring at the rear tyre of an Aspar Kalex right now. Is he going to save it until the very end of the session before diving past Danny Holgado, as he did on David Alonso at the final corner of the Czech Grand Prix? They're both doing low 136s at the moment, a 36.1 apiece for Ortola and Holgado on the last lap. A 35.8 for David Alonso now, as he slots into second place. We have an Aspar 1-2.
Yeah, good lap time from Alonso. Can't quite tell if that's used rubber or if it's new rubber slotted in. We know Alonso, okay, he was on pole position last time out, but the Achilles heel so far this season for the number 80 has been that one lap pace on fresh tyres. And we think we saw that over in Brno, if memory serves me correct. He went on to some fresh rubber late in FP2 to try and have a little bit of a sneak preview going into qualifying a little bit later on. So maybe that's the case for Alonso. If it's on used tyres, then that's a really, really good lap for Alonso, putting him pretty close to his teammate, who we're watching now just ahead of Ivan Ortola. Not going to improve this time around for Ortola, but a low 136 is sort of where we're seeing the pace at when the riders get to what Ortola and Holgado are on. Lap 13, a 36.0 though for Holgado, as Lewis rightly mentioned a couple of seconds ago. Really impressive pace this from the number 96.
It's an Aspar 1-2, an intact 3-4 at the moment. Gonzalez and Aegis are both in the pits. Here comes Quetas, who climbs 10 places up into P11. David Alonso is about to spoil this very close free practice 2 session at the moment, because we've currently got Navarro on a personal best, so he might also get within a second of the outright pace. But no sooner as he does that, David Alonso is about to move the goalpost, and this should be the fastest lap time of the weekend here for the number 80, who certainly would appear as if he's more comfortable on a brand new soft tyre in qualifying trim now as Alonso, after taking his first Moto2 pole officially in Brno last weekend. A 1:35.535 for David Alonso. We're still a long way away from the lap record of Diogo Moreira, the reigning champion, who was in the 34s last year, but that now is the fastest lap time of the weekend so far.
Nice marker laid down then from the number 8. He did say yesterday that Assen, not necessarily that he doesn't like the circuit, but one that doesn't necessarily suit his characteristics on their motorcycle. So he was really happy to land here at the TT circuit Assen yesterday and feel like the bike is part of him, as he did over in Brno. And we saw obviously in Brno that Alonso led for 99% of the Grand Prix. Obviously got beaten at the end by Ivan Ortola, but Alonso was the best he'd felt all season long, and he's got a similar feeling this weekend. And ahead of qualifying, I imagine that is at least one fresh Pirelli piece of rubber in the front or rear of that motorcycle of Alonso. But Alonso clearly once again, like he was in the Czech Republic, feeling good, and that's what he was saying yesterday as well.
Yeah, he was talking about the balancing act of where to try and find the time around here and where not to, because he admits that in the faster corners, and there are quite a few fast corners, including that one, which David Alonso nearly high-sided out of. We've already seen crashes there earlier in the weekend for the likes of Fermin Aldeguer, whose weekend is already over, unfortunately. More news on that as we get into the MotoGP FP2 session coming up shortly. Coming through, this is into turn 10 Mandevin, and then round 11 of Duikersloot, which is coming up now. And the rear is going to start to spin, left foot off the peg, and so once again having to Moto2 machine. You're in third gear, around 145 kilometers an hour, but Alonso keeps himself very much on
there around the exit of turn 11. Not a place, there's not many places on this circuit where you'd enjoy crashing out. No one enjoys crashing, of course, but if you're going to pick a place on this circuit, it wouldn't be on the exit of turn 11, as Lewis rightly mentioned. Fermin Aldeguer, big crash there yesterday, same place where Alex Marquez also went down, and we've seen plenty of crashes there in the past. Alonso just getting the rear end lit up a little bit too much for his liking. a little bit earlier on in this session as Alberto Ferrandez then. Good lap time from the rookie on the number 54. He did say yesterday, to be fair to Ferrandez, that he was having a solid pace and working in the right direction. It was a bit of a disappointing weekend over in the Czech Republic at P22 across the line for Alberto Ferrandez after picking up his debut top 10 a couple of weeks prior over in Hungary. But this is a much more promising sign for Ferrandez to be in second place currently in FP2.
Yeah, he used his teammate Ethan Guevara there as perhaps a bit of a carrot, a bit of a reference of the road. Guevara's down in 16th place, and yeah, might be asking Alberto Ferrandez what his secret is, because his Boscoscuro appears to be working absolutely fine at the moment around this circuit. Via, the home favourite, have just gone up into third too. He's now in the 35s, 1:35.793 for him. Philip Salac now also gets himself well into the 35s as the Czech goes up into fourth place, chasing a fourth consecutive front row start later on today.
Yeah, back-to-back podium secured, future secured, so the life of Philip Salac is going pretty swimmingly so far in the last few weeks, which is good to see from the number 12, and it looks like he's made some positive progress on Saturday morning as well. Ferrandez still harassing Ethan Guevara, climbing all over the back of the rear end of his teammates. This is a part of the circuit where slipstream really comes into effect, and already saw in Moto 3 between Adrian Cruzes and Guido Pini. Got a little bit too close for comfort coming into Ramshoek of the turn 15 before it opens back up into the famous Timmer chicane. Just lost a little bit there, did Ferrandez, compared to teammate Ethan Guevara. Where does Guevara P11? Not a bad job done from the number 28, and Aaron Canet, we spoke about him a little bit earlier on. Again, more signs of progress on that Boscoscuro, and thankfully so for the number 44. Jumps into the top 10, just one place ahead of teammate Dennis Onchu. So a much better start to Saturday than we've seen in previous Grand Prix for the Alpha Mark VDS duo.
8th and 9th at the moment. We've also just had an improvement moments ago for Danny Munoz, who's going up into third on a 35.792. Goes through qualifying one later on today, does Munoz, for the second Grand Prix Saturday in a row. So not the ideal start to the weekend for Munoz, but having passed him in the nearby accommodation that we're staring in, the Hofvan Saxon here in the Netherlands, I can tell you that a Paul Friday is nothing a trip on the water slides won't fix.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, that can be said for anything, really. A good day, go on the water slides. Bad day, go on the water slides. Would highly recommend it if you are in the region and fancy staying at the Hofvan Saxon. Yeah, I would highly recommend it. I've also seen Jose Antonio Rueda on there, Max Quiles and Danny Holgado were having races down there. Can confirm myself and Pico Charles were quicker down the water slides than Max Quiles and Danny Holgado, so we've got at least one upper hand on them. And the upper hand in this session, at the end of it, looks like it's going to be Senna Regis. But for how long? Because Manu Gonzalez is responding, but loses time in that final split. A great lap time then for Aegis. We saw Alonso serve up a bit of a warning sign a few laps ago, but that's a real warning shot from both of the teammates down there in the Intact GP box. Aegis just a little bit ahead as things stand of Gonzalez.
We've all had your fun, they've said. Now it's time for the Intact pair to really show what they're all about as we ride on board with Senna Aegis 1:35.213. So now within half a second of the lap record held by the reigning champion Diogo Moreira. Gonzalez, as you can see now, bottom of your screens, is continuing to improve. A lot of traffic in the way here of Aegis. Up ahead of him is the 85 of Zuratusa for the Clint Forward team. And the Mike VDS pair are also in. No, certainly one of them is Denis Onchu. And the Speed RS duo of Vietti and Lanetta are also in that pack. Lanetta has jumped out of the way so as not to impede those behind him. As we now ride on board with Aegis, who's got a face full of forward now as he's right up behind Zuratusa, and now moves past him as they navigate their way through this slalom-esque section of this final sector. We're now through the fearsome Ramshoek corner, turn 15, taken at around 175 kilometers an hour in fourth gear on a Moto2 bike, and the iconic Geert Timmer chicane, which we hope the Moto2 battle will be decided at tomorrow afternoon at the end of this 22-lap Moto 2 Grand Prix of the Netherlands. Ages improves still further his advantage over Gonzalez. Momentarily he's at 10.5. Gonzalez is about to cut that gap, or is he? No, he doesn't. Can't match Ages in that final sector. It's advantage Australia.
Certainly is. The Aussie looking really good here. Said yesterday that he felt comfortable all day long, and clearly that's carried over into Saturday as well. Knet in the background just gets Ramshook a little bit wrong, which ruins his lap time. This is Danny Munoz in P5 as things stand. I don't think an improvement's going to come this time around. No, loses plenty of time in that final split, but Aegis nailed that final split, even having to negotiate past Jabi Zuratuza, and straight line speed is where Aegis has struggled so far in 2026, and obviously you cutting it through corners, fast kinks through turn 12, 13, 14, and then flicking it left into Ramshook at 15. But you still need a decent bit of top end through that part of the circuit, and Aegis, despite having to get past a slower rider in front of him, nailed that final split. But this is a real good pace shown by the championship leader on your screens now, and the rider who sits about 2 metres away from him in the box in the Intact GP garage. So a little battle, as we've mentioned, away from the circuit, potentially brewing between these two, and certainly so far this weekend, the top two going into qualifying, especially in this session anyway, and the pace we're seeing at the end of it is between the 18 and the 81.
Yeah, Aegis had the edge on Gonzalez in the final sector yesterday. The strongest Ortola 18 on a 136.1, although he's a session behind, as mentioned, after his fall at the start of practice yesterday. So Vietti will have other priorities at this stage of the weekend. Q1 to come later on this afternoon, following our Moto 3 qualifying battle. And David Alonso, is he the likeliest threat to an intact 1-2 in qualifying later on? We shall see. The 80, who was fastest in practice yesterday afternoon, third quickest this morning.
Jadi
Well, I was going to say our cooler conditions,
Itu yang-
it's all relative. It is much cooler than it was yesterday afternoon, but it's still a very toasty 27 degrees for a couple of minutes shy of 10 a.m. Here at the Cathedral of
Jadi
Speed.
urutan pertama di
The kind
Moto
of conditions we are
F
used to
itu ada
at this
Senagius,
particular stop
Manu
on the
Gonzalez,
calendar.
David
As
Alonso,
mentioned, this is round
Alberto
10.
Fernandez,
And we'll meet the
Munoz,
halfway point of the season
Pejan,
by the
Salah,
time we're done at Saxon
Salgado,
in a couple of
Aaron
weeks'
Kent,
time.
and Toby
The home
Ar-
fans will be
Tony
buoyed by the performance of Colin
Arbolino.
Via as he takes 6th place
Ah.
in this morning's session, but it is intact to head into qualifying very much
Betul
on
tu.
top. Center
Ada.
Aegis quickest with the
Ini.
fastest lap time of the weekend, a 1:35.1. Edges out his teammate Manu Gonzalez. Alonso third. Standout performance from Alberto Ferrandez. Top Boscoscuro fourth, ahead of Munoz, Via, Salach, Holgado, Canet and Arbolino. That was your top 10. Untu next up ahead of Escrich, Huertas, Guevara and Roberts. Jose Antonio Rueda was 16th place last year's Moto 3 winner. Garcia, Vietti, Ortola and Forasato, of course, completing your top 20. Forasato through to Q2 already. Piqueras 21st, head of Zuratuza, Vanden Gorberg and Sasaki. Navarro, Pavlek, Valletta and Ralston completing your 28 rider field with just a second and a half covering the lot of them. GP in just a moment with free practice 2 up next.
Isn't it? The T circuit Assen 4.5 super fast sections as well, including that magnificent sweep through the final sector, starting at turn 12, finishing at the timber chicane 16, 17 and 18. Good morning and welcome back to our live coverage of Sprint Saturday action here in the Grand Prix of the Netherlands. We're edging ever closer to the halfway stage of our 22-round 2026 MotoGP World Championship. And just like we had here yesterday in the northeast Netherlands, blazing sunshine, scorching hot temperatures. Former world champion Jorge Martin saying yesterday it was like being in a volcano. His experience of day one here in Assen felt like it was easy to ride in the tropical climates of Buriram and Sepang yesterday, as ambient temperatures were not far shy of 40 degrees on one of the hottest days we've ever had at this magnificent Assen circuit. The Aprilias, well, they were in red-hot form as world championship leader Marco Bezzecchi led the way, bouncing back after his super difficult weekend in Brno last time out. Bezzecchi leading 3 Aprilias inside the top 4 positions at the end of practice Friday. Ralph Fernandez was his closest challenger. Pedro Acosta on the fact of course at his beloved from the remainder of this Grand Prix. He had a heavy crash at turn 11 yesterday. Confirmation coming from the Gresini team this morning. The 21-year-old Spaniard is out with a fractured T7 vertebra, the exact same injury which his teammate Alex Marquez suffered recently in his horrible crash with Pedro Acosta at the Catalan Grand Prix.
As the 54, the rear comes round on him, but he lets go of the bike and it's there as he hits the lip of the gravel trap. He then gets spat up into the air. Not a crash that anyone wants to see again, certainly not Fermin Aldeguer given the injury. Yeah, the T7, Alex Marquez, of course, fractured his C7. The T7 is sort of halfway down your back. Still a nasty, painful injury, of course, puts Fermin Aldeguer's participation next weekend in this, or a couple of weeks' time in the Saxa Ring into some serious doubt. We are at least pleased to report, as you can now see, that Alex Marquez does continue in the weekend after his own high-speed spill yesterday.
Yeah, it was Alex himself who had this big crash. This was a vicious old get-up as well, wasn't it, for Alex? Still in recovery mode after the serious injuries he suffered a few weeks ago in Barcelona. Alex was to be reviewed by the medical staff here in Assen this morning. Clearly he has been given the all clear to ride in this session. He did withdraw last weekend after qualifying in Brno. We're going to find out where Alex is currently once again now, because that hundredths of a second. In go the eye drops, and looking to drop his pace here this morning will be Jorge Martin. He said yesterday, brutal were the conditions. Jorge said it felt hotter than Buram and Sepang. He said it just felt like my face and my body had this burning sensation. It was so hot here yesterday. And Jorge also had a pretty high speed get off himself going through turn 12 in practice. He lost the front at 230 kilometers an hour, which took his crash tally up to 16 for 2026.
Which I think he's just seen on our screens as he had a little bit of a nod towards his crew chief there, who was just off to the side of the picture, Daniele Romagnoli. That was his crash. Fortunately there for Jorge Martin, there was an awful lot of space for him to fall into when he clipped the curb coming through the fast turn 13.
Yeah, he didn't blame the curve for that incident, Jorge Martin. He said yesterday he was trying not to overheat the rear tyre, and in doing so, just took a little bit of weight off the front, so the front wasn't loaded enough, he said. His comments post-session yesterday. He was quite lucky. He sort of went into starfish mode, didn't he? Didn't get picked up. Both he and bike coming away from that incident relatively unscathed, when you think that he did launch it into the initial long tarmac runoff. Maybe a few bumps and abrasions for Jorge, some friction burns for him to contend with. So, yeah, umbrellas, well, so often here in Assen, in the northeast Netherlands, you've needed those to protect yourself from some pretty torrential rain. But the umbrellas are essential gear and equipment this weekend to shade yourself from the sunshine. Marc Marquez, 6th fastest yesterday. Of course, back-to-back wins in Brno and in Balaton in the Grand Prix have really fired the world champion back into championship contention. But he said yesterday he felt like from the very first lap of day one he was going to be in survival mode, a survival weekend. Mark said the risk here in Assen, given the speeds and how narrow this track is, you have to be so millimetre precise. The risk is super high. You just feel like, Lewis, Mark's going to lock down into, not damage limitation mode here, but pick up as many points as he possibly can, particularly looking ahead to our next Grand Prix, the Saxa Ring, where we expect him to be super dominant once again. Yeah,
opportunities to come in the second half of the season for Marc Marquez to gain big points. It doesn't feel as if this necessarily is one of them, but we'll see where he qualifies, and I'm sure he will I don't think anyone in their heart of hearts can mount a defence for Frankie Morbidelli after that.
Let's be honest, downright dangerous from Frankie. Cruising in the middle of the circuit through a fifth gear corner. Enea Bastianini had some rather choice words last night for Frankie, his fellow Italian, saying that this is not the first time. I mean, that was super scary, wasn't it, for the number 23 on the Red Bull KTM. Thankfully for Enea, it did not cost him a place in Q2. That was one of his flying laps. His very next one was a brilliant one, a 1:31.588, which did see him collect 8th place. He goes directly through. We did see another incident, a separate incident, just a few moments before that, Bastianini Morbidelli clash involving Diogo Moreira. Diogo Moreira was indeed called up to the FI MotoGP stewards, but because it was his first offence, he was actually impeding Morbidelli on that occasion. Just an official warning for Moreira, so he's had a bit of a slap across the wrist as well.
Best 72 Assen loves you was the message on that banner, and it does feel like Franco Pesecchi needs a bit of love at the moment after his experience in Brno. Assen loves him, and I'm sure he loves the circuit back, given his performances of yesterday, fastest in both sessions. As Matt mentioned, it wasn't just Bezzecchi from an Aprilia point of view who was right on the pace yesterday. 3 of them inside the top 4. Raul Fernandez here who's, I think, just pleased to spend weekend not in and out of hospital. Second quickest overall in a 1:31.300, and it generally has a real feel that Aprilia, as they did in Mugello 3 races ago, have a genuine shot of locking out the front row this morning.
Best Friday since the Australian Grand Prix in Phillip Island for Ralph Fernandez. Some return to prominence for the Spanish rider after he was really struggling last weekend with a nasty bout of appendicitis. Ian Bruno did a cracking job of salvaging a 6th place in the sprint and a 7th place in the... At the end of play yesterday, he was just a whisker over 0.3 of a second behind the Aprilias. All 4 Aprilias directly through to Q2. As Marc Marquez then ventures out onto circuit. You do wonder where Marc's risk and reward ratio is going to be sitting here this weekend. And what about Fabio Quartararo? Well, Yamaha once again are having a thoroughly miserable time. Quartararo was their best runner yesterday, but only as high as 15th place, almost a second behind Marco Bezzecchi. And once again, Fabio Quartararo spoke to the media last night. 0 grip, 0 turning, 0 power. Apart from that, everything all rosy in the garden for the Yamahas. Fabio very pessimistic about his chances. When asked about what he could do this weekend, he said, well, a points finish would be a good result. He's got much loftier ambitions, much loftier expectations, but this new V4 powered M1 is just not at the races. It's not cutting the mustard at all, is it?
Is that Ralph Fernandez breaking down at the top of the picture? I think Davide Brivio was trying to keep an eye on that on the screens. Might not have spotted it. There was definitely what looked like a trackhouse bike. It was Ralph Fernandez down at De Bolt, who's had a problem. That's not a crash, I don't think, for Ralph Fernandez. He looked like he just pulled straight off the racetrack on the run down to De Bolt. So some early gremlins for the Trackhouse Aprilia.
Yes, the KHMs have been conking out too often so far in 2026, but Ralph Fernandez, let's have a listen.
See something on the dash maybe and just shut the bike off immediately.
It's not in full functioning order, not in full working order, is it, that Aprilia at all? He did really well there just to take straight to the gravel trap going into turn 9. Ralph Fernandez, that's going to certainly disrupt his early Saturday morning plans. Fabio Di Gianantonio once again comfortably advancing into Q2. Did you a 7th at the end of play yesterday? One of several riders that did actually put in their best times on the very last lap of the session. Of course, it was red flag for the Fermin Aldeguer Alex Marquez instance. There was only, 3 minutes of the session remaining when Pecco Bagnaia clawed his way up from 17th to 5th. It was some late lap, wasn't it, by the double world champion? As well, he can't be any further away from the paddock here, can he, Ralph Fernandez? This is going to be a long trip back. Is he trying to get it going again, maybe? Or no, is he just trying to find maybe a Marshall's truck, a pickup that can get him back quickly?
Yeah, not the ideal start there, is it, for Raul Fernandez?
Here comes
there
the trailer unit.
Some assistance on its way behind him. So, yeah, it's not the ideal conditions, is it, to be wheeling your bike yourself and essentially powering a factory Aprilia by your own arms and your own legs. So Ralph Fernandez will shortly get some help. It's not the kind of session that you want to lose track of course. Q2 places, the top 10 already decided yesterday afternoon, but crucial session this to try and get yourself dialed in ahead of the sprint later on, and of course the full length Grand Prix over 26 laps tomorrow.
Here's Bezzecchi then through turn 5 he goes. He was awesome, wasn't he, yesterday? Absolutely awesome. Just the second time this season that Marco Bezzecchi has led both sessions on a Friday. He did so at the opening Grand Prix in Burra, and we know what happened there. Brilliance in the Grand Prix, although he did crash out of the lead in the sprint. Talking of the World Champs leader, let's get a tech update about the number 72 from Jack down in pit lane. Good morning, mate.
Yeah, good morning to everybody at home. Thankfully, at the moment, a little bit of shade in pit lane, which is very much needed, given the temperatures that we've got. And yeah, Marco Bezzecchi, the World Championship leader, quite interestingly, does have some new rear aerodynamic items. It's very much of the same concept that we still see on the motorcycles of Jorge Martin, Ralph Fernandez and Ayagura, but a very small change that I believe was first introduced last weekend at the Czech Grand Prix, but for obvious reasons, Marco wasn't able to do a whole host of laps on it. Most interesting thing is, he's already on both of his bikes, so he clearly feels that it's a step forward in feeling. The engineers will clearly feel that it's a step forward in pace as well, but at the moment, Marco, the only rider in the Aprilia family to have this new rear aerodynamics package.
Thanks very much, Jack. Well, what we were saying about KTM's going kaput too often in 2026, well, Pedro Acosta is going to be getting sick and tired of this. Sick and tired of this, because we said in Brno on the last lap, when he packed up on the last lap, this KTM have got to sort this out. They have to sort this out. Well, once again, look at the lights on the dashboard there of Pedro Acosta's RC16.
It's like
it's the bare minimum. You have to put a reliable motorcycle underneath your riders.
Yeah, it's like the Las Vegas Strip, isn't it? The dashboard of that KTM at the moment. Let's have a listen as he approaches the Ramshock. He already has a bit of a moment there coming through, which ends up putting him onto the grass. And he's now sort of hopping over the rather rough grass on the way down to turn 15. But KTM did say on the eve this weekend that they didn't expect any kind of solution until at least the Saxon ring, and unfortunately they've been proven correct.
Yeah, his patience is already wearing thin, I think, Pedro Acosta. It might snap very, very soon. Because once again, the KTM that's underneath him is not reliable. And this has to be a concern for KTM and for Pedro Acosta in particular.
Is he only going to have one bike for qualifying now?
I mean, here he goes then now into Olympic sprinter mode, which when you're in full racing leathers, helmet, boots and gloves in this kind of heat is going to be getting the heart rate spiking, that's for sure. Fabio Di Antonio briefly led this FP2 because just behind him out of picture, Marco Bezzecchi has powered through the Timmer chicane and got down to 1:31.844. So Bez and Digia straight away into the 1:31s.
Yeah, Pedro Acosta's on the other side of the racetrack because he parked up on the inside of turn 15, didn't come in the pit lane. He's got to find a tunnel to get himself back across the circuit and into pit lane once again. And as I mentioned, qualifying, fortunately he's in qualifying 2, Pedro Acosta, not qualifying 1, so around about an hour or so away from qualifying 2, but there's the possibility now that KTM might only be able to provide Pedro Acosta with one bike for that session.
Well, there was the big, very public failure in Catalonia, which then of course involved the luckless and the innocent Alex Marquez. There were 2 failures which cost him points in the World Championship in Brno last time, and now another one then to start Sprint Saturday here in Assen. And yeah, it's put him right under the cosh, hasn't it? Again, he's going to be losing some very important track time here this morning. The chance to work on tyres, the chance to work on setup, the chance to get your electronics dialed in. As Marco Bezzecchi, well, he's well and truly dialed in, isn't he, with this TT circuit Assen. Straight away, having led FP1 and practice yesterday, he immediately finds himself back into top spot as he now attacks hard into the Timmer chicane. He said, well, the Aprilia said yesterday, it's not necessarily the final sector, the Timmer chicane part of it, turns 16, 17 and 18, where they're really making the time. It's through the fast left-hander of 15. That's where they've really, really got the speed, the downforce from all their aero. Ayagura was saying, yeah, they're really strong through 15. That's where they are really making up some big, big gains.
Yesterday in free practice 1, they locked out the top 4 in that final sector. Yesterday in practice, 4 of the top 5 were Aprilia's. Only Pedro Acosta was quicker on his KTM than an Aprilia in that final sector. Acosta, you might recall, was following Pecco Bagnaia at the end of practice yesterday as both riders launched a late bid to either safeguard or take a place in qualifying 2. Both did move through as Marc Marquez now moves himself up into a 6th place on a 1:32.390. You do wonder if Marc Marquez was offered right now a pair of top 6 finishes for the weekend, might he take it?
Long, fast corners have always been Aprilia's domain. Nothing has changed here in the 2026 Grand Prix of the Netherlands, has it? As we pick up Bears on another good lap here. He has not yet won a sprint so far this season. He's bailed out in 4 of them. Of course, he won't thank us for reminding of what happened in the sprint 1 week ago over in the Grand Prix of Czechia, where he crashed out of a top 5 on the second to last lap. And thereafter, there was a pretty unsavoury altercation with the trackside marshal, which got him suspended for the Sunday Grand Prix. But his response has been brilliant, and it has been emphatic. Is this another improvement on his lap time? No, not quite, but it's a 1:31.9. He is banging in the 31s for fun this morning, Ben.
Yeah, that 1:31.903 he's just done is still faster than anyone else has been this morning. Only Gian Antonio is within a third of a second of him at the moment as Bagnaia pulls into the pits. It was noticeable. They were locked together when the session began, and Bezzecchi had put some serious distance between himself and Pecco Bagnaia on that run. Of course, those two will be very close to each other next season when they are teammates at the factory Aprilia team.
He needs to strike back, doesn't he, Bez? He's lost 62 points to Marc Marquez in the last two Grand Prix in Hungary and in Brno. Well, we mentioned it was a real bruising and tough Friday here in Assen for Gresini Ducati. Two big crashes for both Alex Marquez and Fermin Aldeguer. The latter, unfortunately, ruled out with a fracture in his back. Let's get the thoughts of Gresini boss Michele Massini, who joins Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. A bruising day yesterday for the Gresini squad. Just firstly, Michele, on Fermin, sadly out for the remainder of the weekend. How is he and what is the initial diagnosis?
Yeah, so as we communicated 1 hour ago, Fermin had another medical check with Angel Charten, and he suffered the fracture of the T7 vertebra. And for that, he will go directly to the International Medical Center of Madrid just to check deeply. And after that, we will know better how will be the recovery. Now, because I have to listen the Madrid doctors, but I will say that we will be lucky enough that later we have the summer break just to come back in Silverstone in the best shape is possible for Fermin and also for Alex.
Yeah, on Alex obviously already came into the weekend, thought at 100%, a big crash yesterday. Great to see he's still out there on the bike. How is he this morning?
Yeah, he's feel, luckily good. Like yesterday, it's true that there is some abrasion in the arms, but in the end, he has the speed, and just we have to understand just to don't take more risk than usual, just to try to complete a GP weekend.
Thanks, Michele.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much, Jack. Yeah, thanks to Gresini boss Michele Massini. Yeah, you do feel that Fermin Aldeguer and the team may well decide with just the Sachsenring Grand Prix between that and the summer break before we head to the British Grand Prix at Silverstone in early to mid-August, whether they'll just decide to give him that sort of 5 or 6 week buffer to be fully recovered and back to full fitness to attack the British Grand Prix at the spectacular Silverstone circuit. Speaking of spectacular, whenever that man's around, it usually tends to be, as it's been a very, very long journey back to the paddock, hasn't it, for Pedro Acosta, who's being accompanied by his crew chief there, Paul Trevathan. And unfortunately, this is not a new experience for KTM and Pedro Acosta. No time set so far. Straight on the scene there immediately is the boss, Aki Ayo, just trying to understand what has happened here with Acosta.
Enough for him to just jump off the racetrack immediately, whatever went on with that KTM. I'm sure he's well versed now. Yeah, it's still on its own steam. He's dropped it into neutral, but I'm sure Pedro Acosta's had enough experience of KTM breakdowns to know exactly what went on.
He was in 5th gear, he was off throttle, so he wasn't on gas when he clearly felt something. Yes, that will be agitating, to say the least, as he slams in the chest protector and gets back onto his spare factory KTM. So no time set for Pedro Acosta. Just a little bit of early morning housekeeping if you are joining us for the first time this weekend. Cal Crutchlow once again in for the injured Johan Zarco at LCR Honda, and Augusto Fernandez swelling the Yamaha ranks to 5 V4 powered M1s this weekend. He's back for a play as a wild card. Augusto at the moment down in 21st place with a 134.641.
He was 22nd yesterday of the 23 that we had on track. Of course, that has now been reduced by 1 with the withdrawal of Fermin Aldeguer. Marc Marquez, well, 8th place at the moment.
Drama with Frankie Morbidelli yesterday, and Aya Bastianini did get through directly into Q2, and big question marks about the future of Maverick Vinales down at Tech 3 KTM. So lots to chat about with the boss, Gunther Steiner, who joins Jack.
Yeah, he does indeed. Great to chat with Gunther as ever. And so far this weekend, it's looked like a bit of an Aprilia and Ducati show. So for Enea to get himself inside that top 10 yesterday must have been a huge result for him and the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he did his last lap, I think was he did a good job. I mean, you know, because the tire was used, as you know, or not used. He did a one lap on it, and he just pulled it off. And as you say, it seems to be a Ducati Aprilia show, but 2 KTMs are there as well, which is good, you know. So no, fantastic job for him, and it's what the team needed, you know, because in the race normally we can say have a say in it, but in qualifying he struggled, and yesterday he got into Q2, and let's see what we can do today in Q2.
We've spoken at length about the 2 open seats in your team for next year, the experienced rider, the rookie combination. We know that Maverick Vinales is a clear candidate for one of them. He was pretty strong in his comments with the media in Brno, then again on Thursday here, saying that if he isn't in MotoGP next year, the only people to blame are KTM, when seemingly KTM are the only people who are going to employ him next year. Is that the smartest thing to be doing?
I think you know the answer to that one. Oh yeah, I don't think it's the smartest thing to do. You know, and I actually think I don't know why he said this. You know, as you say, if you haven't got the choice, you know, if you're a beggar, you cannot be a chooser. You know, so in the end, you know. But I don't know what he was thinking, or maybe he wasn't thinking when he said it.
Will that have any repercussions in terms of that final decision?
I'm sure it doesn't help, but I mean, these things, you know, and blaming KTM for it, I think that's a little bit harsh as well, because I mean, the performance, I mean, the KTM, you know, is it an Aprilia Ducati in the moment? No, but the performance is there. Pedro is doing well, and Enea was in the top 10 yesterday, so it's not only KTM to blame. So, you know, I don't know what, as I said, I don't know what he was thinking, and maybe he was very emotional about it, you know, because there is a chance that he's not around anymore next year in MotoGP, and he just, the emotions got ahead of himself.
We've seen a few technical issues for KTMs over recent weeks. Another one this morning with Pedro Acosta. How concerning is that to you? Have you still got full confidence in the motorcycles that have been provided to you?
Yeah, no, as you say, and it seems to be mainly being Pedro, you know, and I just saw what you saw before. I mean, I don't know what happened this time. Could be completely something different. So let's hope they get a grip on it. It's always a concern when you see the same bike, because they are the same bikes stopping. So we had one issue with our ones, luckily, but Pedro had a lot more. So let's hope our bike stays together and we don't have any more issues.
Thanks, Gunther. Great to chat as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Always brilliant to hear the thoughts of Tech 3 KTM boss Gunther Steiner. As he mentioned, it was a cracking job by Bastianini yesterday to get himself into Q2. Only the 7th time in 31 appearances at KTM, Enea will feature in that second qualifying session. We know he's got great race pace, but he has qualified poorly on several occasions. And as we heard there, some choice comments in the media, both in Brno and here in Assen, from Maverick Vinales about his future, or lack of, at KTM. Well, as the Top Gun shot himself in the foot in terms of his aspirations to stay on the grid next year, because quite clearly there, Gunther Steiner not impressed with the way Vinales has decided to go about seeking employment with the team next year.
It's been a running theme through Maverick Vinales' career, hasn't it? Right the way back to when he was a young kid in 125 and Moto 3. He's always, it's what makes Maverick the character that he is, that he wears his heart on his sleeve. But I think perhaps may have chose his words slightly differently had he got a second opportunity to voice those opinions in the media. He's not exactly negotiating from a particularly strong position at the moment, is Maverick Vinales. Not altogether his fault, of course. The injury that he's been grappling with for a year now still affecting Maverick Vinales, and it must be so frustrating as a rider when you're riding for your very future and you're doing that short of 100%. But Maverick, with his words off track and his performances on track, perhaps not making the greatest case at the moment for a place on the grid next year.
Shot. What a shot. Bezzecchi in full flow, as he has been since lap 1 here in Assen. Beautiful shot there, going through turn 12, just over 230 kilometres an hour. That, of course, was the corner where his teammate Martin bailed out yesterday. But he just looks so full of confidence. And he needs to stop this a little bit of a decline, this little bit of a blip in what's been a fantastic 2026 so far for Bears. The third place in the sprint in Hungary was the last time he troubled the point scorers in this year's championship. And of course, his reversal in fortunes has been the opposite for Marc Marquez, who was clicked into overdrive with back-to-back wins in Brno and in Balaton. As we pick up Joan Mir. No Honda directly through to Q2 yesterday. We haven't said that too often in recent weeks in MotoGP. Mir was 12th quickest. He said it was obvious. The Aprilia super strong in that final sector where you need the high-speed turning, the mid-corner speed. The Honda, well, it was the polar opposite, wasn't it, in that fourth sector. Luca Marini was 16th fastest in Split 4 yesterday. Joan Mir 17th fastest. And as Joan Mir said, well, he was losing 0.4 of a second right here in this last sector. In the first sector, Mir was second quickest. So it's pretty clear where HRC have got to get their ducks in order, because Mir coming to this first sector now, well, only Bezzecchi was quicker than him. But he was 17th and losing 0.4 in that final split.
Yeah, give me a 0.4 of a second for free and it would have put him up inside the top 6 yesterday. So for 3/4 of the lap, and certainly the first quarter of the lap, Mir certainly does have the pace. Will be in qualifying 1 and will certainly be a favourite in qualifying